All right, folks. So to get us started off, we're gonna go ahead and go through the street outreach workflow. This is more of a refresher and a training. So this is going to be assuming that you're already relatively familiar with the process of searching for clients, creating a client, enrolling a client. We're going to be going over that again, but more so we're going to be all right. So, like I was saying, this is going to be a refresher. It's assuming that you know a significant portion of the system as it is, sort of how to navigate client track, how to do some of the basic client track things. We're going to be going over that again, but really our concentration today is going to be on timelines of when you enroll a client, when you document their date of engagement, and really talking about the difference of like trying to define what engagement actually means. And I'd also say that we'll be going through an example client, and I'll talk a little bit more about what it means to be literally homeless and chronically homeless and explain why that's sort of important in this process. So we're going to start off by talking more about general concepts, and then we will move into client track itself, where we'll go through a basic enrollment, but then I want to show you some of the tools that we now have, like document check, things of that nature, that I think can be hugely beneficial to the organization and to y'all, just to keep in mind and to sort of incorporate into your workflows whenever you can. So again, all this training is really going to be centered on what is HUD sort of dictating, what is required by HUD for the purposes of documenting street outreach. There may be additional things that y'all are doing because you may have grants or funders that expect a certain type of outcome. I'm not necessarily going to be training to that because I may not have the full context for that. So I'm really going to show you sort of what serves as the baseline for street outreach projects in the system. So again, for the agenda through today, like I had mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about terminology, in particular, what does it mean? What does a contact mean versus an engagement? What is a current living situation versus a prior living situation? Why it's important to differentiate that. What are some of the timeline for data collection? And then talk a little bit more. Recently, there's been a shift to document more of a current living situation rather than just the street outreach contact service. And again, that is stemming from HUD's data standards update. So let's talk a little bit about terminology. So for terminology, there are two, and this is a chunky set of words, but for terminology, there are two different terms that you should sort of have in mind. It's contact, and contact is really when you encounter a client. A contact could be as simple as like giving them hand warmers and a sandwich, or saying like, hey, how are you doing? And then they tell you I'm fine, and that could be considered a contact. And contacts are really there to help us understand where a client is at, if they're still in the situation that they have been in. It's a very passing thing. A client may not give you a lot of information during that particular contact, but it's good to record that contact either way, because we know that they're still active. We know that they're still homeless and still in the areas where they are, they've been congregating. And one thing for context is that there's always an attempt, there's always a request that we try to get where the client is staying that night or where they were staying last night, so that we can have a better understanding of during this contact that you had with the client, did they let you know that they were still literally homeless or still in a place not meant for habitation, or are they moving on to something different? Now, an engagement is not the same as a contact. And so maybe some of you that have done some data entry for the system have seen engagement, date of engagement, and might not necessarily think that it's a important aspect to track, or might not know that a date of engagement is a required aspect for reporting in particular. So if you have a street outreach project that's funded through ESG dollars, for instance, your ESG caper will only process, well, it'll process every client that's enrolled in your program, but it sort of gives a extra piece of attention to anyone that has a date of engagement recorded, because one of the outcomes for outreach projects, according to HUD, is to try to engage the clients. And so when HUD is asking for a street outreach APR, they're looking to see how many clients you have engaged with. They care about how many you've contacted and how many you've enrolled that may have never fully engaged with you, but more so the engagement portion is when they say, all right, let's now we're going to treat this with the full sort of data quality standards that we have to be looking at these clients for, and it really is there to really kind of differentiate those clients that you may not fully engage, that you might just give them, occasional services or trinkets, versus those that engage in an actual case plan. So what does it mean for a client to be engaged with you? So that could mean that there's a creation of deliberate client assessment or case plan. So it's a client that says, you know what, you've been coming around. I do want to do a case plan with you. I'll fill out your intake paperwork. I'll give you a significantly more information about myself than I might have given in the past. And it could even be that they say, oh yeah, I want to complete a case plan. I want to come into your day shelter services. I want to, they just want to further their engagement with your case managers and with your and with the services that you all are providing, that go beyond sort of just the basic needs of food, or blankets, whatever it may be. And one thing that I want to clarify is that a date of engagement may not necessarily be the same as when you assess them for coordinated entry. Engagement is not necessarily coordinated entry. There's not a one-to-one there. It could be an instance where a client says, I don't want to be part of that coordinated entry thing. I don't want my information going out, but I want to engage in services with you. What do you all have for services? That would be an engagement, that you've engaged that client in your services. They're not ready for coordinated entry. Maybe they will be at a future date, but that's still an engagement. Or it's a client who already has been assessed and they're in the CES prioritization pool, but they still engage with you through your case plans and your services, and that itself would be a date of engagement as well. So don't associate one-to-one that a date of engagement is the same date that they completed their coordinated entry assessment, because that's not true. A client could choose not to engage with coordinated entry at all and still have a date of engagement with you because they want to receive your services, your case plan services. So that's a differentiation that I think is important to sort of ingrain. A contact is when you see a person, when you say hello, when you're able to visually confirm that they still exist and that they're still out there. And an engagement is when a client says, let's move forward with a case plan. Let's try, here's more information about myself. What are your services? So those are the two sort of touch points that you'll have with clients. A client can have multiple contacts. A client can continuously contact you, over and over, and you'll probably be recording a lot of contacts per clients. But a date of engagement, there's only ever one of those per enrollment. So moving on from there, next concepts to sort of understand is a client's current living situation versus their prior living situation. And so I just want to really quickly kind of help to clarify these two concepts. So a current living situation, and I'll get into it a little later, but a current living situation has sort of effectively taken, it's taken over what would have previously been a street outreach contact. So a current living situation was introduced to our Continuum, our COC, by HUD in October 2020, and it effectively was designed to take over the street outreach contacts. Before, for years, you would just document a street outreach contact. Now, this is more tied in line with a current living situation that has to be recorded for the client. And a current living situation is effectively just saying, where's a client sleeping tonight? So if I myself, Sal, am going to be talking with a client, I'll ask them, where were you sleeping? Where are you going to be sleeping tonight? Where were you sleeping yesterday? Trying to get a sense of what their living situation is in this very moment, during this day. So if they feel that they're going to be sleeping in the same tent that they were last night, then their current living situation would likely be placed on rent for habitation. Or if they're on their way to sleep with their brothers for a little bit, then that might be that they are living with family on a temporary basis, right? So current living situation can change a lot, and it's really designed to help us understand where a client is, how the client's homelessness is evolving, where, it helps to confirm whether they've been homeless for the amount of time that they've said they have been, and it helps us build up a history for that client's homelessness as well. So current living situation is a really important tool, and it's an important thing in our continuum, and the way that we've implemented it in our system is that it effectively can replace outreach contacts. It keeps a client active in the CES pool. So current living situation is again is effectively a replacement for your sort of traditional street outreach contacts, but it provides us a much richer piece of information. And we'll talk more about the two in tandem, in comparison to one another. And a prior living situation, so what does that mean for a prior living situation? So prior living situation only is really a one-time thing. Current living situation, a client's going to have multiple instances of those because their situation changes continually, right? That's the beauty of it being a current living situation. A prior living situation, prior is in reference to when you enroll that client. So if I enrolled a client on July 1st, right? Prior living situation would be saying, where was this client sleeping on June 30th? Like the night before, where were they sleeping? Where were they living on the night before? And literally, it's just to that singular night. It's not to multiple nights, or not to like, where were you generally in the past week? It's saying, I'm enrolling my clients on July 1st. Prior living situation wants to know where they were on June 30th, and that will be static for this enrollment set that they released. So again, it's a prior living situation can only have one, and current living situation likely has many. So with that terminology out of the way, I want to start to talk a little bit about the timeline of when data is collected and what triggers what in HMIS. So here in my top half, I have kind of what just general. It's looking at the general context that we had, looking at how are we engaging with the client in that moment, and then below that is what you would do in HMIS. So up here, let's assume that we meet our client for the first time. This is an initial contact that we have with someone. After that initial contact, what we try to do is get their name, their phone number, whatever it may be. They may not give us that full information, but if we have their name and where they live the night prior, then HUD requires that we actually enroll that client into our street outreach project, and then document the current living situation for that particular client. And I'll show you how we're going to do that, and show you a way that we can sort of do that quickly and cancel out of having to complete the entire assessment. At this point, with this initial contact, you don't need the full information. You don't need to know their health insurance or their disabilities or anything of that sort. You just kind of need a partial name, a way to identify this person, and really just run with that. You don't need more than that. And HUD doesn't start to count data quality against you until you input a date of engagement for that particular client. So we have our initial contact, and then let's say we start to talk with the client more. We see them a few more times. So the next time, let's say we see them 2 more times after our initial contact with them. We give them a couple of pamphlets, we give them a sandwich, hand warmers, and then and during each of those moments, we want to, whenever possible, document that current living situation so that the client remains active, so that we know that they are actually in the system. And so let's say that we talk with a client enough that they have several contacts that they've provided for us. Now they're ready to engage with us. Now they're ready to say, you know what, I trust you. I want to move forward with you, and let's get me into services and connected with your organization more intensely. So this is considered an engagement, and in HMIS, this is the point where you would add a date of engagement for the client and complete the entire assessment. So date of engagement is assuming that you're going to have, you might not have the full set of information for the client, but that you have enough to sort of get you through and to get started documenting that client's situation and enrolling them fully into your program. And so what happens is you continue to sort of see the client and to get context. Well, it's pretty simple. You just keep documenting current living situations with that client as you move forward. That's really the case. This step number 4 right here, is the same as step number 2. You're just going to document current living situations as needed. And then notice that I have in gold right here, client is assessed for coordinated entry. It's different than the date of engagement, right? If the client, these are 2 different concepts. Now there are situations where maybe a client is both assessed for coordinated entry and chooses to engage with a program on the same dates. But in this instance, let's say that they wanted to engage with my program first because they trust me, but then I was able to talk them into coming into coordinated entry. So another thing to note is that coordinated entry, everyone is in coordinated entry. Everyone, I mean to say, all users are sort of assessing people for coordinated entry. So it might not even be your agency that enrolls a client into coordinated entry, and that's fine. It doesn't impact your date of engagement with a particular client. And then, you have a client that gets exited from the street outreach project. Maybe they are auto-exited after a period of inactivity where they don't have any services system-wide, not even just your organization, but just system-wide, they don't have any services, or the client has a positive outcome. They moved into permanent housing, or they were placed into shelter, and at that point they said, you know what, we're good now, thank you for helping me, or you can sort of offset that case plan to the other case managers that this person may be working with. So here I have another sort of example that goes a little bit more into detail in terms of comparing the event versus what is an HMIS. So you may have someone that you meet at an encampment and you try to get them engaged with you, but they don't want to move forward. But at the very least, they give you a name, and that's effectively a contact that you now have with them. So you would enroll them into your project, even without that full data set. So then you see the client again through a contact, and you discuss their information, but now they're starting to sort of trickle out a little bit more information, right? They may give you a birth date and some more information about their homelessness history, but not enough to sort of complete a full assessment or be considered a full engagement. So at that point, all you have to do is update the client's record with any new information that you might have and document their current living situation to record one of those contacts. Then the client may say, yeah, I want to engage with you fully. I want to move into a case plan. I want to move myself out of my situation. And once this engagement is documented, at this point, you would indicate the date of engagement when we go into the record. And at that point, data quality will be measured for your ESG caper. So it's going to be required all throughout for your ESG caper. And then here again, we have that the client is assessed for coordinated entry. And I really want to mention that like coordinated entry is a separate process from what y'all are documenting as street outreach workers. I know that you do a lot of the two, there's a lot of cross outreach assessor roles, but for the purposes of the system and of data, we're really only looking at we're really only looking at date of engagements, and we connect which clients you were able to assess separately, but when you report out to HUD, HUD doesn't really necessarily look at that all the time. So I want to mention a little bit about current living situation and contact services. So for years, y'all have had to just use contact services to identify whether a client was engaged. There were a lot of instances where it was a common practice where you would just document a service without necessarily enrolling them into your project. And I want to mention that like contacts require an enrollment. The initial contact requires an enrollment. And as of October 2020, again, HUD had implemented this new concept, the current living situation. And the current living situation is a more refined way to ask more in-depth questions about where the client is living. So, the outreach contact question, it was really only asking, so you documented a contact, and is this person still in emergency shelter or street or in a place on for habitation? And those were the two questions. Current living situation is a little bit more in depth. If some of you have already gotten in there, you might see that there is a full range of locations for a client to be in. There's place on for habitation and institutional situations, permanent and temporary situations. So it runs the entire gambit of where a client can be in any given system. So it's a lot more in depth, and that's really designed to help capture clients that may be in flux, right? Maybe you engaged with a client who was last night just came out of jail, and for their current living situation, you would indicate that. That would be something that you document. So I think it's a lot more in depth, and it provides richer data. And it also serves as an outreach contact. So it was designed to sort of take place of an outreach service. But one thing that I do want to sort of bring attention to is that I know the current living situation is a little longer to complete than an outreach service. For outreach services in the past, you might have been able to, check off clients one by one and quickly add the service without having to go into each client's record like you have to do with current living situation. We are trying to work on a new way to enter current living situation so that you can do that, so that you would be able to sort of say, all right, for all my clients enrolled in coordinated outreach, I just want to be able to check off boxes and answer the questions here en masse for the clients that need a current living situation, as opposed to going to each individual person's record and sort of going through that entire process. So it's something that's in the works. It's not out there yet, and I don't think that I'm hoping that we could roll it out by Q4. So that's something that we're exploring and working with our vendor and our development team to make a little simpler. So with all that having been said, I want to go ahead and get us into client track so that we can start the process of enrolling a few folks. And in particular, I'm going to be using coordinated outreach as the main tool that I use for the purposes of this. So Again, I am enrolled in my project. You can see here that I am under the organization of coordinated outreach. And what I'm going to do is, in this scenario, we're going to go through an example where I get in touch with the client who gives me an alias. They give me a nickname, right? I don't have the full name. Instead, it's a partial name, and I have a age, but I don't have a date of birth. But they still talked with me. They still showed some interest in engaging with me, and it's someone that I can, I have enough information to input their info into HMIS and begin to track their needs and build their case effectively. So I'm going to create a quick client, a quick fake client. So we're going to go with someone that called themselves, ultimately their name is going to be Robert Smith, but they go by Bob S. That's the name that they gave me initially, right? So I have Bob S. And they didn't give me a full date of birth. They only gave me a partial date of birth. And again, this is assuming it's someone totally new to the system. From what I understand, there are people that you may recognize, people that you already know. This is assuming that you've also searched for the client effectively, I was looking for Bob S., Robert S., going through the motions of ensuring that I'm not duplicating a client's record in the system. So I'm going to say that they gave me an age and that they were 30 years old. So their date of birth, if I just have an age, I just put it to 1991. And I'll go ahead and click on next. And so for name quality, I'm going to say partial or street name. And this is important to sort of track too, because it helps provide a better way to track the clients that are currently sort of in flux in progress of being fully assessed by you. I don't have the social security number, and I'll say that the client refused that. The date of birth quality, again, it's going to be partial or date of birth or partial date of birth reported. And then for ethnicity, I'll say that client refused and client refused. We don't want to kind of go through the process of assigning a client an ethnicity or gender or veteran status, anything of that sort. So this is where we start off with, right? We're going to finish this. The client's going to be created. And it's pretty bare bones because they haven't given me more information than this. But I still do an intake for them. So you're going to see how quick this intake process will go. I'm going to go ahead and click on intake. Here, I'm going to say use a current client because we just created their record. Here's Bob S. So I go through Bob S. right here. I click on finish. This was a screen that I was just on. Bob doesn't have anyone else in their family. They're a single person. So we're going to go ahead and click on save there. And we're going to enroll Bob into our coordinated outreach project. And the project start date, for the purposes of our training, I'm going to pretend that I engage this client, on 8/1. So we'll backdate this to 8/1. This is just as an example. It's just as an example. I don't put exit date, and notice here I have my date of engagement. I'm not going to fill that out until I have confirmed that the client wants to move forward with a housing move-in date plan, or not a housing move-in date, with a case plan. And what I'll mention is that date of engagement sort of starts the process of documenting data quality. So you will get negative outcomes if you start date of engagement a little bit too early before you have the full information. So that's just something to keep in mind as you do some of your data collection and work with clients. So we have our client right here. I'm not going to input the date of engagement. We have our start date. I'm the case manager. They're the head of household. We're going to go ahead and click on save. And so now you may be wondering, okay, so we've gotten to this screen. I have to complete all this information. It doesn't let me move forward without filling this stuff in. How, how is this a feasible workflow? Well, at this point, you would just click on pause the workflow or even cancel the workflow. Right now, your client has this enrollment recorded. They've officially recorded a full enrollment, so even though you don't have this information right now, you eventually will, or if you don't, then you'll exit this person. So at this point, I'm just going to click on pause the workflow. The workflow was paused successfully. And notice that I have coordinated outreach documented for my client right here. They are fully enrolled into the project. And at this point, I want to introduce you to the current living situation feature. So we enrolled, my client had a project start date of 8/1. I got a contact with them, and I'm going to record that contact through the current living situation system. I'll click on add new current living situation. Now the enrollment, notice that you had to sort of do the enrollment first to sort of kick off that the client is starting to engage with you, that the client is starting to interact with your program. So I go through my enrollments, and the information date, again, I'm going to backdate this, but that's more for the purposes of let's assume that we're back on August 1st. So I backdated this to reflect the date that we enrolled our client, and I'm going to indicate that the current living situation, that they were in a placement for habitation, and for location detail, you can input they were located downtown, put in encampment notes, whatever you need to put in. Check off record contact. This is a button for you all to record the type of contact that you had with them. And the contact service, I'm going to say that this was just a outreach encounter. But notice here that like if you have a client you're already engaged with and that you've worked with them, you could click check off CES updates or a CES client contact. All of these keep your clients active in the system and active in the coordinated entry pool. So that's just something to keep in mind as you move forward and document. But I'm going to keep it to outreach encounter. And that's about it. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on save. And so we've officially done our first initial contact. We enrolled our clients and paused that workflow so that we can complete it at a later date. And we have also documented that contact that we've had with the client through the current living situation system as well. And again, I know the current living situation system is more in depth than the way you might have done it before. And that's, again, I really want to ensure everyone that that's something that we have on our radar and that we are hoping to fix and make easier in the next system update that we have in HMIS. So now let's say we've gone a couple of days forward. And now I have another just general contact. Nothing came from it. Well, what came from it is that the client gave me their full name. So this is our second contact that we've had with the client. They have still not wanted to move forward with giving us their full information, but at least now they give us a name and they gave us their actual date of birth. And they also told us what their race and ethnicity was. So now we're moving more towards getting a fuller set of information. So we're going to update their profile and then update and add a current living situation documenting where they were that night. So for this date, I'm going to assume that it was on August 7th. Let's go with August 7th, okay? So at this point, we already have our clients. We already have our client enrolled. That's already done. Uh, what I'll start off with is documenting the contact I had with them. So I'm going to click on current living situation. I'm going to add the contact I had with them, which occurred on 8/7, remember. It's attached to my outreach enrollment, and they're still in a place not meant for habitation. I'll record in my contact. It's another outreach contact. We'll click on save. And so now we've recorded 2 outreach contacts for our client, and we are now going to update their record. So you don't have to go through the process of, clicking the action item and clicking on edit project entry workflow. If it's basic demographics, if it's race, ethnicity, name, SSN, there is a button right over here that says edit client. We can simply go into that, click on edit client, and alter it here. So it's a lot quicker, right? So I'm going to just put in Robert Smith. At this point, the name, date of quality is full name reported. The date of birth, they gave me their full date of birth, and that was 5/2/1991. I have to change date of birth quality from approximate or partial date of birth to full date of birth reported. Ethnicity, it was initially client refused. Now that's going to be, let's go with a non-Hispanic Latino. And race, I changed that to white. And let's say that for gender, they confirmed that they were male. And veteran status, they still have not told us. That's something that they have not provided to us. So we can click on finish. And now we have the most up-to-date information regarding our client in this system. Now, the next step that we're going to take is documenting the date of engagement for our client. And so one thing that I want to prepare y'all is that the date of engagement is when you should have the full set of information. That's when you should have all the information on the client, or at least the majority, I should say. So their information regarding their health insurance, disabilities, non-cash benefits, and income. Those are things that you should have prepared, or at least the majority of that information should be prepared and ready to be documented in this system. So again, we're going to go ahead and enroll this client, or not enroll, but show that the client has now engaged with our program and complete the assessment for them. So here I'm going to click on my blue icon, and what I will do is click on Edit Project Entry Workflow. So the Edit Project Entry Workflow is a great way to kind of just start from the beginning and document everything that you need. So you'll click on Edit Project Entry Workflow. So now we come back to this screen. Remember, we were just on it. I wanted to show you a quicker way to do it, but when you update that button, when you click on Edit Project Entry Workflow, this is the first page it starts off on. I review this, and I'll say that now the client has told me that they are not a veteran. So I'll click on Finish, so that updates. They still don't have any family members, so this is fine. We'll click on Save and Close here. Now we get to this screen. And on this screen, I'm going to actually add my date of engagement. So I'm going to say that this client engaged with me yesterday. So it'll be 8/10/2021. I'll click on Save. And this is the point where you start the process of documenting the full information for the person. So we start out with disabling condition, and I'll say that they did say that they had a disabling condition. The client location should almost always be IN 503, Indianapolis. It's just most of the time you should be doing it out of there. There might be certain projects that do it in the balance of state, but most everyone's going to be here. And then living situation. So again, with living situation, prior living situations, looking for where were they sleeping before they enrolled. And one other thing that I want to mention is that approximate date homelessness started. Uh, to define that, it's not when do they start experiencing a housing crisis, when do they start experiencing housing instability. Rather, approximate date homelessness started is asking when did this most recent episode of homelessness start for the client. So if you have someone that tells you, yeah, I've been homeless since August 2014. It might be good to ask them like, well, has that been continuous? Have you been continuously homeless? And if they say something like, no, I had an apartment from 2018 to all the way to January 2020. And so when you, as a case manager, as an outreach worker, as someone that's inputting this information into the system, you would recognize that January 2020 is the approximate date homelessness started, because that's the beginning of the most recent episode of homelessness for the person. And so why does that really matter? Why am I sort of bringing extra attention to it? It's because this particular section, in addition to disabling condition, help to inform whether someone is considered chronically homeless. These are the 6 questions that will determine whether someone is chronically homeless or not. And so for those of y'all that, just to kind of do a refresher of things that you may already know, literal homelessness, as defined by HUD, is considered when a client is in a place not meant for habitation, an emergency shelter, or a safe haven project type, or they are in a motel that is paid with emergency funds, emergency service funds. And one thing to note about one thing to note about what it means for a place not meant for habitation is that places not meant for habitation don't just include encampments or sleeping on the street. It also includes abandoned buildings, condemned buildings, buildings that were deemed unsafe for people to live in. Cars and vans are also considered places not meant for habitation. And so when you encounter folks on the street, I just want to give a reminder to everyone that there's a wider breadth of unsheltered homelessness that doesn't necessarily mean that they're, sleeping on the bus or sleeping in a tent or sleeping in an underpass. It also can include they're sleeping in their car, they're sleeping in a van, they go to an abandoned building during some nights. If they have a shelter over their head and that shelter is an abandoned building, that's not really considered shelter, because they could get in serious trouble being there potentially, or they're putting themselves in danger because of that. So that is considered literal homelessness. And that definition sort of moves us forward into defining what chronic homelessness is. And when defining chronic homelessness, I like to tell people it's 3 major things, right? Just for the ease of remembering. So your client has to have a disabling condition, and this disabling condition isn't something that's, it's not a broken finger or a sprained ankle, because those things you can heal out of. It might impact you a little bit for some time, but you can heal out of them for the most part, or set up, continue working for yourself in some fashion. What you would consider a disabling condition that's an indefinite and of an indefinite duration is something like mental health, substance abuse, chronic health conditions, things that would require a set process or a set way to kind of mitigate your symptoms, mitigate your issues. Because with mental health illnesses, that's not an easily solvable thing. That's not going to be something that you just kind of get rid of one day or you heal from it entirely. It may be continuous, and it may reoccur later down the line. So that's something that can impact people further down the line. So 1, a disabling condition, right? 2, they have to have stayed in a place that's considered literally homeless, which I just finished talking about. And then 3, in terms of time, we're looking for 12 months or more over the past 3 years. So there's more to that definition of it's 4 episodes of 4 or more episodes of homelessness over the past 3 years that make up 12 months. But really, you're looking for 12 months over the past 3 years to have someone considered chronically homeless. And those 12 months should be in literally homeless situations. So those are the 3 major aspects that go into determining whether someone is considered chronically homeless. So I'm going to go with someone that has a couple of different episodes of homelessness. So this episode of homelessness is 11 months, but they've been homeless before. And over the past 3 years, it's been, let's say, something like 16 months. It's been well over the 12-month baseline. So we answered client location. I'm going to say IN 503. And then for prior living situation, I'll say place not meant for habitation. Let's say that they're in an encampment. Their length of stay has been 90 days or more, but less than 1 year. Approximate date homelessness started. So I said 11 months, so we'll go with September 2020. Then regardless of where they stayed last night, number of times the client has been in the streets, an emergency shelter, or safe haven over the past 3 years, including today, I will say that it's been 2 times. And the total number of months homeless on the streets, an emergency shelter, or safe haven in the past 3 years, we'll say more than 12 months. So this is a really critical part. I've put a lot of attention to it for a reason. It's how you really help to push your client forward and to give us the best data so that we know where to match them to and so that we can open them up for different services potentially. So it's just something to keep in mind and put particular importance to. So now we move over to covered by health insurance, and I'm going to say no for this for now. We'll click on save. Now I've identified that my client has a disabling condition, so I will start out by saying that they have a chronic health condition, yes, and the condition is indefinite. And they also have a severe mental illness. And so from there, in this particular screen, you have to answer what the client has and what they do not have. So these selects, I have to change it to no. And I can easily do that just by clicking, and it automatically changes to no. Or this box right up here, if I check that off, everything else changes to no as well. I'll click on save and close. Now I go into my question about domestic violence. If you check off yes, there's more questions required, but I'm going to leave this client as no. And then we have income. So with income, I'm going to say no, they have no income, and no, they do not currently have non-cash benefits. Click on save and close. And now for my date of engagement, it's also asking me, all right, so you finished this long assessment. What is their current living situation right now? So here I'll say that they are in a place still not meant for habitation. We want to record the contact, and this is a outreach encounter. Click on finish, close the workflow. And so we've officially fully engaged and enrolled our clients into the project. One other quick way that I want to show y'all in terms of adding the quick way to add the date of engagement, you can also just click on the action button, this blue action button right over here next to your enrollment. Click on edit enrollment. And if you scroll down and then scroll to the right, you can also add the date of engagement right here. But just be cautious because it does force you to scroll to the right. If you come here and you don't see the date of engagement, just remember that you can scroll left to right here. it trips up a lot more people than you would think. So we click on cancel because I didn't change anything there. Now, one thing that I want to quickly discuss with y'all is the potential let's see. So we've enrolled this client, and I'm going to show you how to exit them eventually as well. But one thing that I want to mention is there are ways to check which of your clients have different documentation on record. So I'm going to switch my workspace back to home, and I switch workspaces by clicking this icon right next to client track, clicking on home. And so let's say I wanted to check out my documents collected. Which of my clients are missing documentation? Now, again, this may go above and beyond what you are expected to do, but it's something good to check. So I will say that I want to look into my coordinated outreach, and now it's loading. And notice right here, it shows me which of my clients have a driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, DD-214 benefit award letter, or pay stubs. So this is providing me all the information about who needs what documentation as we work with them. So if I look for my clients, Smith. So Robert Smith has none of this documentation uploaded at all. You can see here that their driver's license, birth certificate, SSN haven't been uploaded. Notice the dashes in the DD-214, the dashes in the benefit award letter, and the pay stub. They're dashes because that means it's not applicable to the client. Because if you recall in my enrollment, I said that they were not a veteran, they did not have benefits, and they did not have employment income. So a quick way that I can upload that is just by clicking on this door right over here, jump to document check, and it takes me to the document check record keeping system, right? So that's a quick way to come to document check. You can also go to document check through here. So notice right on the client's sidebar that we have document check right there as well. And so let me go through the process of showing you an upload for, let's say, a pay stub or an ID. So I'm going to click on add new document check. My document checklist is going to be homeless. And the item requiring verification will be identification. So the way I want y'all to think about this is that homeless is really kind of saying these are the baseline documents that need to be collected. So it's under homeless, you're going to find sort of the basic things: identification, address, income, eligibility. That's going to sort of be your go-to for the most part. For my skilled assessors or folks that are skilled assessors, you may be checking off coordinated entry and uploading some more of the complex documentation. But for the most part, everyone's just going to be working out of homelessness. The item requiring verification is identification, and the acceptable document is going to be a driver's license. Storage, we're going to say that it's on file because we're going to upload it. And I'm going to choose my file. So let me see right over here as I look for the right one. So let's say I'm uploading this image, right? Let's pretend that this is a PDF that is actually what I want to upload, right? Now this is uploaded. I can click on save. And now we have our document uploaded. When I go back to my document check in the home workspace, I once again hover over current enrollments, and I'm in the home workspace because I can see right up here in the upper left-hand corner, it says home. So under current enrollments, when I hover over it, I click on documents collected. we're gonna select my coordinated outreach program, and I'm going to search for my person. And notice that they now have their driver's license documented fully. And another thing that I want to let y'all know about, and this actually doesn't work for that one. Sorry. So we're going to go back to our clients. And when you're in document check, you can once again download the file. But really, this is not, I just want to show y'all this so that you know how to do this if the client does indeed come with you with additional information that they can provide you. So just note, this is something to keep in your back pocket that you can do for the clients to upload their documents. It really does help move people a lot quicker into housing, so just keep that in mind as we move forward. Now, with this client, I'm going to go ahead and actually exit them from our project. So we're going to click on this drop down, and we're going to click on exit the enrollment. And so one thing that I want to tell y'all is that some outreach providers have a auto exit and an auto alert. So what that means is that if a client goes without X amount of days of no contact, then they are automatically exited from the project, and most of the time they're given a destination of unknown, and so when we look at the system and look at the outcomes and try to think through which of the clients, what strategies are working and how can we best work with clients, we want to get into the process of trying to document destinations wherever we can, the most accurate destinations that we possibly can. So, I know it's hard, especially with an outreach team, to try to document that, particularly when it's such a transient population. But I just want to sort of restate the importance of a destination. It helps us know what's working, how many clients have been successfully diverted from the system or out of unsheltered homelessness. So it's good to know that and try to be as precise and accurate as possible. So when I check off my destination, I'm going to say that it is that they exited that we were able to fully engage with them, that they were continuously talking with us and keeping us up to date. And I'll click that they're going to be staying with friends on a temporary tenure. And at this point, you can document any services that you might have provided the client. So if you gave them a bus pass, you can document that it was $15 for that particular bus pass. Let's say you also gave them care coordination as well, and there was no fee to that. And you also provided case management and let's say food and hygiene. So those are some of the things that you can start documenting. If you need to catch up on services when you exit a person, you can sort of backload all the services you provided to them. Although you should try to document services on a consistent basis instead of waiting until the very end when they exit the program. We're going to click on save here. And now we're going to get into our assessments to update any information that might have been there. So here you can use default last insurance status. So I'm going to say that my client is still not covered by health insurance. And we'll click on save. And now the system wants to know, all right, has anything else changed in the client's life? Their disabling conditions are still the same. We'll click on save and close. But let's say that for income from any source, they were able to get a small job, right? They were able to get some extra employment income coming in. So we'll say that it's $600 that they're now making. So they now have income. So that's a benefit. That's an improvement on our client's life cycle. But they still don't have non-cash benefits nor health insurance. So we're going to click on save and close. And now for the current living situation, this is going to sort of be the last current living situation we document for this client as of this enrollment, right? They might come back into the system. Uh, for this, I'm going to say that they are now living in a friend's room on a temporary basis. So notice here, now it's asking, so you indicated that the client's staying with a friend. Are they going to have to leave their living situation in 14 days? I'll say, if you say yes, it continues to sort of go down the line of asking, all right, how secure is this housing for this person? That's really what these questions are trying to get at. It's trying to define a different category of homelessness. There's an at-risk of homelessness category where if a client's going to be imminently kicked out of a unit in 14 days, that is at imminent risk of homelessness. And there's also another aspect of homelessness where we would call it doubled up, where HUD defines that as being a situation where the client has for the past 60 days not had the keys or immediate access to a unit, but is still living in that unit with another household. And so this is trying to get at that situation. So here you can see that these are the questions kind of trying to understand, is this client sort of doubled up by HUD's definition? And so what I'll say here is that the client does not have to leave their situation in 14 days. We're going to make it a little easy and leave it at that. Let's say that the client never really confirmed it for us. We asked them and they said, I don't think so. So if they self-reported that, then we go with that. We'll record the contact, document that this was a outreach encounter, and click on save. So we've exited our client. Here you can see that this is now documented all the services that we've put in. You can see that these bottom three are all the outreach encounters that I documented through the current living situation system. These are the services that I documented as I was exiting the client and sort of checking off the services that we provided them. And then finally, we have the last outreach encounter, which was just saying that they were now living with friends on a temporary basis. So those are some of the tools and some of the systems that we have. This is just, again, a quick refresher on how to enroll clients, how to interpret current living situation, and how to upload documents for them, which is sort of a critical thing because it really does help move clients through the system that much quicker if they have their driver's license and some of that information already fully documented in the system. And a couple of other things I want to mention for y'all if you haven't really used it. If you check out alias history, you can see each time that a client's name has changed. So notice that when I updated my client's name from Bob S. to Robert Smith, it automatically created this record. So if you're working with someone in an encampment that might have given you multiple names, or maybe they're trans and now they have a dead name, something of that sort, you can kind of come in here and start to track that through here. And this is a good resource to kind of give you a better sense of like, oh, this client is Bob S. Now I know that Robert Smith is Bob S. and these, my notes make sense, or my colleagues' notes make sense, whatever it may be. And you can also check out address history as well. Now, address can be used to sort of document where they're staying at, right? Whether it's a temporary, maybe you put in the intersection that they're at. But more importantly, I think address is really important because it also tracks telephone numbers. That's a pretty significant thing to track. So I would double check addresses if you need to look for anyone. And that is, I think, for the hour and a half that we've had, this is about the full set of information that I wanted to provide y'all so that it's not total system load, overload. One thing that I want to encourage everyone is to check your current enrollments, and maybe this is more directed towards the program managers, but when you click on current enrollments, when you actually click on it, if you select your program, it'll show you all the clients that are currently enrolled in your program, and also show you how long they've been enrolled for. So one thing that I want to encourage y'all is that for days enrolled, look out for any clients that seem to have been there for multiple years. Is that actually true? Is that likely? We ask that you kind of help us in looking at that and reviewing that and ensuring that there aren't clients with 2-3 years of an enrollment into a student outreach project. That may be the case, very well it could be the case, but it could also be the case that someone just forgot to exit the client or they kind of fell through the cracks. Are there any questions at all? And one thing I want to note is that I know I mentioned that this is going to be recorded. All the names that popped up, I'm going to be blurring them out when I upload it, so no client information is going to be shown whatsoever. This was just sort of a session that we had right now. And I'm also happy to do another session later down the line if there are just more Q&As or challenges that y'all have encountered. Well, folks, if that's it, I think we are more or less good to go.